Welcome to Other Side of Life. You can meet us on the web at blogtalkradio.com/Other Side of Life. My name is Art, and I'm coming to you from the historic city of Boston. Today is Thursday, November 7th, 2013. And the question tonight, the big question is life after death real? The belief in life after death, as we all know, crosses all ethnic and cultural boundaries, yet here in the West, there still seems to be a stigma attached to the belief that life beyond this one still exists and that there's life beyond what we can see. My next guest says that life after death is real and that we don't die and that she can prove it. Best-selling author Sandra Champlain is to tell us about her most recent book titled We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Tonight we'll hear about her personal journey that led her to a life-changing discovery that life after death is real. She'll also give us healthy tips on ways that we can cope with loss and grief of a loved one. And later we'll also meet a special guest who comes as part of our special memorial tribute to Boston poet Christopher Peters. So we're going to introduce Sandra now. Sandra, welcome to Other Side of Life.
Hello, Art. I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for asking me.
I'm so glad to have you, and it's a pleasure to have you on, and I just think that you're an amazing person. So anyone out there listening, please pay close attention to what Sandra has to say. She will truly inspire you. Sandra, the first thing I want to start off by asking you is just, you say in your book, We Don't Die, that you were afraid to die, and that's the opening question. Is everyone afraid to die?
I think so. I don't think that normally we think about it. I think we get very busy in our day-to-day lives, and it may be the last thing from our minds unless something happens. If we lose a loved one, or if our life isn't going well, or for me, I'm not exactly sure what caused it, but looking up at the stars one day, having a life that I was very unfulfilled, and the same bad things kept seeming to happen, losing a grandparent, losing pets, and then all of a sudden it just hit. What happened next? And the fear, I can make light of it now, but during the time, which was back in '96 when it hit the strongest, it was something that I just couldn't stand, and I had to get to the bottom of.
Well, you talk about in the book about the fear that you had, but I thought to myself as I was reading it that, are we moving every day in our lives trying to avoid this voice? Are we trying to suppress this reality that, that of the inevitable? And is that what we're doing in every day, or are we really embracing life and really trying to go for it? And that is your voice as well. You're about, people going for what they want. And I was just wondering if that's also an aspect as well.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that for the most part, many of us are already dead, so to speak. We live so busy in our lives that all of a sudden, the older we get, and I'm sure you can relate, the faster time goes by. So we're not stopping to smell the roses, as they say. We're not noticing if a beautiful song is on the background. We very rarely see the sunrise. We get really caught up in technology these days. I'm really guilty of that as well, and can miss a human being that's sitting right next to us. I think it's easy to be caught up in that and not be living a fulfilled life. And part of my message, in fact, a big part of my message in We Don't Die, is when people can embrace life and really look at this life that we're here for a short while. And I playfully ask some questions about why do you think we're here, and what if we are on purpose, and are we fulfilling that purpose? And, Art, so often we hear this, but it's a fact. Most people leave this lifetime with regrets, with...
Exactly.
I talked to a heart surgeon who's done thousands of operations, and of course he talks to the patients just before they go under, And he says the people ask, all people have the same three things. They're regretting things in their life. They're wishing they had done something different. And there's conversations that they have never had with a person that they thought they should have, or something that's left unfinished. And they're all looking for, they all have faith all of a sudden. You know, even if they were an atheist before, boy, it could be their final breaths, and they're trying to believe in something. And so what would it be like to live a life that we can actually look back and go, yeah, I did it all. Yep, did that. Could have done
Exactly.
a little bit more. And yeah, so why
Well,
not?
what I thought was also interesting is you start taking the reader on your journey, and one thing that you did is you had this fear of dying, and you started exploring, and you started to now really explore different faith traditions. Now, you yourself come from a Catholic background, from what I understand,
Yes.
and I was curious about your background as a Catholic, because Catholicism is very much about, you know, angels and spirits and the afterlife and purgatory and heaven. So were you surrounded by these ideas of life after death, or did you kind of see that as a separate thing in your mind?
I think I saw it as a separate thing. We went to Catholic school because we had to, all dressed up on Sundays, and we went to church together. I don't think at the time I actually chose my spirituality. I was born into it. So just hearing these stories of angels and God, and while it sounds nice and good, there was not any hardcore evidence for it.
Yes, yes.
So I needed to know more.
Okay, so then you started exploring different faith traditions, and you were energized by all the different faith traditions, you know, uncovering different truths and seeing things. But what's really interesting is even though you explored those faith traditions, you still didn't find the answer. And I wanted to know why. What was missing?
Well, everybody had the same underlying core messages, and there is a belief in life after death in the top religions of the world, so that was comforting. But again, it was still just belief. Nobody could really show me the goods that I have nothing to fear. So faith wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough, and I don't have any other way to explain that except for everything I learned was good. And at the time, Art, I said to myself, I'm not going to find any proof. I don't know where else to turn, and I'm just going to have to rest this conversation and be the best person I can be and hope that there's nothing to worry about if I live a life like that.
Well, what I find interesting, too, is not only now do you start exploring the different faith traditions, but then you really start getting into the human mind and really trying to understand the way the mind works. And when did that shift take place? Because before it was sort of looking and reading different, but now you're really starting to question the actual mechanism of the mind.
When it happened for me was in 2002. My life, I don't want to say it was bad, but it was not fulfilled in my job. Having a series of breakups with men, always being left for another woman, financially terrible, nothing to look forward to, woe is me. And I had gone on a trip to England, and I had met a gentleman on a vacation the year before at a Club Med. So we met on the dance floor, you know, dancing and drinking together and whatnot. And he had given me his business card. Yeah, here's what I do on vacation. He gave me his business card and said, if you're ever in London, look me up. So sure enough, it was a year later or so. I was in London, and I had sent him an email. Oh, I'd love to see you. You know, love to get together. And so when I saw him, he walked into the restaurant, and he had lost a lot of weight. He had quit smoking, quit drinking, was in a relationship with this woman he said he met shortly after he met me, and he had started 3 businesses that were all very financially successful. I'm thinking, what the heck happened to you? And then so he said, well, how's it? You know, I didn't answer. And then he proceeds to ask me how my life is. And then, it was not great. And so he says, just go on the internet when you get home and look up a course called the Landmark Forum. And he says, go take the weekend course, and then we'll talk. So that course is all around the world, and it's simply a weekend's course for being human, with all the things about being human, how our minds work, how something can happen in our life, and how we can make it mean one thing, even though maybe a person meant it another way.
Right.
And it was not, nothing spiritual about it, but it just kind of got to the core of how we tick. And I was actually able to look back on my life, and like I was telling you about all the breakups that I had, my very first boyfriend dumped me for my best friend. Okay, so that's what happened when I was 16. What this seminar was telling me was that it could be that in that first instance I made a decision about myself, and that decision that I made about myself has now become reality for me. So what kind of a decision would a 16-year-old make whose boyfriend dumped her for the best friend? One, there's always going to be somebody better than you, or you're not good enough. And don't ever trust a friend. So to fast forward the 20-something years in my life, I had been left for another woman. I can't even tell you how many times. And I never got close to a female friend. And now they don't say this is the truth over the course of the weekend, but you're sitting in there in your chair just processing all this, and I'm thinking, is it possible that I don't have a relationship because of a decision a 16-year-old made? So it's not just about that. It's about so many things. And I left that weekend so empowered, so like I could shift my thinking, which is where everything starts in our mind, and create empowering conversations, and then actually take actions that correspond with that thought and have new results. So I started playing around with this, and there's nothing supernatural or the secret about it or anything, but basically you take new results that you haven't taken before, you get new action. And my life started changing. Good things started happening. I started being happy, and I learned that I'm the captain of the ship. If I'm miserable because of all the people around me, shame on me. And what I started doing is I started being happy, and that impacted everybody around me. And so, yeah, it's very powerful. So I'm like, well, if I can do that, what else is possible? So I really started digging into just about, I don't want to say every self-help thing, but so many things, to start looking like, what does it take to live a powerful life? Looking at things like communication and relationships and fear and a whole bunch of stuff I dabbled in, not knowing where it was all going.
So it's almost like through your search, you discovered your own power, power.
Yeah, definitely. And it was fun too.
Yes, that's what I'm getting from you.
Yeah. Even talking to you before we got on this show, we had spoken last week, and I just knew you were the same kind of person. It's so great to talk to somebody who's about giving and making a difference and being responsible than it is to be around somebody that's complaining all the time, So you can choose who you hang out with. Yeah.
And also, of course, what people out there listening should also realize that it sounds corny, but they create their realities. We have to learn also from those, patterns and things that are going on. But one thing that's also neat is that you not only started exploring the mind, you started going into hypnosis. Now, you have to talk about hypnosis because I've always never really had much faith in hypnosis, but you came to the conclusion that it was real. And I said to myself, okay, she's saying it's actually real. So can you tell us, is hypnosis real?
It is real, and it's not. See, here's the thing. It's not what you think it is. We're so used to seeing the stage show and somebody quacking like a duck or doing silly things that we think that the hypnotist has some kind of a power over us, that we go into this place that we forget and we do all these silly things. Well, see, that's the part that's not real. I bet you have heard of visual imagery that athletes do before they compete. Okay. Hypnosis is the same thing. The only difference is that there's a person actually speaking to you, keeping you awake, as opposed to you trying to see yourself. Let's say before a running event, the runner will picture themselves just the speed and the strength and everything they want to do. If they're jumping hurdles, they can practice it in their mind. And whether people want to believe it or not, there's plenty of proof that people that practice visual imagery before an event actually do better than those that don't. So that's just the way it is. Now, with hypnosis, if I were to hypnotize, say, that same person who's about to go on a track meet or something like that, the only way hypnosis is going to be effective is if I can speak in their terminology and have them visualize what they want to see. So there's quite a bit of a conversation, and I'm taking lots of notes as to what the field looks like, who else is competing, is it a gun that goes off that they start to run, all of those things. And so when you're just at that brink of between sleep and awake and you're visualizing something, it's at that point where our minds take it as it's real, it's already happened, and so like a new pattern is created in our brain. So the bonus of having me, the hypnotist, do it, not that I'm a practicing hypnotist now, but the bonus would be you would tend to stay awake because I'm talking to you, and I could get you into a little bit deeper place where those images get imprinted on the mind. Now, the thing is, Art, I could not tell you something that you don't want to do because you're always listening. You would simply open your eyes and say, no, I'm not going to do that if I asked you to do something silly. So anyways, that's pretty much how it goes. But it's that same place that we are naturally. Every human being goes through a hypnotic state upon waking in the morning and before we go to bed at night. It's just before or after, or just before you fall asleep at night, or just when you wake up in the morning, when our mind and body are relaxed. In fact, if anybody does want to practice and wants to have a better life and wants to visualize themselves, whether it's having a meeting or a conversation that's coming up, how you're going to handle it, that's the perfect time to visualize it because our minds will assume it's already happened, and it'll make it easier for us.
Well,
So
I want
no
everyone
fear,
out there
my
listening
friend.
to know that we're talking with author and writer and speaker, Sandra Champlain. If you have any questions for her, you can call in at 818-394-8534. She would be glad to answer any questions about life after death and about her life experience. Now, Sandra, I'm trying to tie in now hypnosis and creative visualization with this process of understanding life after death, because now you start moving into the psychic realm and you're starting to explore the psychic world. And I'm curious to know what that was like for you.
Oh, my gosh. This is where the story gets good. So everybody, fasten your seatbelts. I did not know that I was on this huge expedition. I was just finding things that were interesting and following and checking them out. And so remember now, I had put the whole fear of dying on hold. I tried to resist it every time it came to my mind because there was no answer. Well, when I had done that landmark forum course, I met a great lady named Nancy. And Nancy was fun and bubbly and smart, and she was a nurse, and we'd get together for dinner. The only thing about Nancy, though, is she believed in angels and spirit guides and that woo-woo world that I did not believe in. So the subtitle of We Don't Die is A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death, because the truth is anybody who believed in that stuff was a freak and not somebody that I wanted to be part of. Well, Nancy I liked, though, so I was willing to listen. And she had given me a deck of angel cards. And it's a deck of cards, and you shuffle them, and every day you can pull out an inspirational message from your angels. And she gave me a deck. I just kind of blew it off, saying, well, of course, whichever card you pull out, there's going to be something inspiring in there, because that's just everything. Every card's inspiring, so I didn't put any weight to it. But I brought this deck of cards with me on a trip I took. And my day job is I'm a chef, and I cook for race car teams, which may sound glamorous, but it's long hours in the heat, schlepping hundreds of pounds of chicken, I say. Anyway, so I was on a 9-day trek cooking in the middle of a racetrack, and I had these angel cards. So every day, just for fun, just something to lighten my mood, I would randomly pull one of these angel cards. I shuffled, and I shuffled well. Well, 8 out of the 9 days, I got the exact same card. And that is very strange, even to somebody who's skeptical. So the card that I got was called music. And basically, the message from the angels was to have music on in the background, listen to the words, music heals the soul, stuff like that. So I decided to turn the radio on at work. And I normally didn't do that. I'm too busy concentrating and working. But having the radio on was good. Angels were right for my spirit. You know, I'd put on dance music or fun music. Well, what started happening, Art, is I would hear a song in my mind, and then it would be played on the radio. And that happened a number of times. And then I started thinking, I must be imagining this, or the DJ must have said the name. So I actually turned off the radio for a while, and I had a couple of like song titles come to my mind, Elvis Presley, for instance, and then I turned on the radio, and the song would be on. So these coincidences are too close to say, you know, just it's my imagination or something.
Right.
And
You saw a message in the experience.
Yes, and I even had this deck, and I work with my mom, and she's like, oh, if these cards are so special, do my cards, you know. And so I pulled out 3 cards for her, you know, acceptance and, I don't know, forgiveness, and something that really applied because she had gotten into an argument with someone, and she didn't quite care for the cards, so let's shuffle them and do them again. We got the same 3 cards. So at this point, there's something up. And so very discreetly, I go home, even though I'm a skeptic, and I type in the name Doreen Virtue into the Internet. And she's called the Angel Lady. She's a psychic and a medium. And I end up finding that she is doing a stage show in, Rhinebeck, New York. And I went to see her. I dragged his friend Nancy with me because I was a little afraid of what I was getting myself into. And over the course of the show, she would tell people about angels and stuff, but when people would get up to ask her a question, she would say who their deceased loved one was standing with them, give something really specific about them, and then there's always some profound message. So these people in the audience got so visibly moved that on one hand, the skeptics looking like these people must be plants in the audience.
Right.
But the girl who's always been afraid of dying is starting to think, well, what if? What if this is real? Now, given that I've had this freaky experience with these angel cards, so fast forward, I decide to spend money I didn't have, pull out the old MasterCard, and fly to Laguna Beach, California, because this Doreen Virtue offered a course in mediumship. In 3 days, you'll be someone who can accurately tell the deceased people around others. So I certainly did not tell anybody in my life that I was going there for that. I made up an excuse. I lied. Yes, I did. And so, can I tell you that story? I don't know if you need to take a break or anything.
Oh no, no, I'm curious. Go ahead.
Okay, good. I just never know because we're going to have to take a break here now, Sandra, and right in the middle of the story.
Well, yeah, because what's interesting though is I want to just because I'm curious to find out now how because you're talking about the psychic stuff, but you also go into these realms of like electronic voice analysis. I mean, you really explore a lot of stuff.
All over. Yeah. Once I started getting into it, it's like, what else can I find? But let me tell you, this is experience because this is the one thing that had me say, holy cow, this is real. Okay, so I take this course in mediumship, and I show up at Laguna Beach, California, scared to death in this conference room with about 20 other people. Doreen Virtue's there. She says, you know, kind of mystically, if you're somebody who's called to be here, you know, you're in the right place, and you'll be someone that can tell the deceased around others. And, oh, the battle in my mind was, there's no way, I can't believe I'm at this place. You know that voice in your head that always tells you
Sure.
you're doing something stupid, or there's no way it's going to work. And then it was saying, if this is true, of course it's going to work for everybody else in the room, but not me. And so she paired us with a partner right away. And she says, I'm just going to give you a demo of how we do a medium reading. We're not really going to do it, so don't even worry. Oh, okay. So she says, basically, grab a partner, sit knee to knee, close your eyes. One person go first. I said, oh, I'll go first. And she says, all I want you to do is to imagine this invisible beam of light connecting your hearts. And you're in a very safe space. And she says, just ask, is there any deceased loved ones that want to come through? And because we were just making this up art, and we're just doing a demo here, she says, just use your imagination and create someone. And then there's usually, you'll see things about the person, you know, tell your partner, and then there's usually a message that comes through at the end. Okay, so I can do that, no problem. So who I decide to make up is a man who I told this woman, it's her grandfather on her mother's side. My imagination created a man who was a fisherman. All of a sudden I thought about Denmark. His name was Jan. He had blonde hair, blue eyes, really windburned skin, a gap between his two front teeth. He died of lung cancer.
Wow.
And here's the message he wants you to give your mom, is he never had told her that he had loved her. He just wasn't one of those touchy-feely kind of dads, and he wants her to know that, you know, he loves her. So I open my eyes. Her turn now, right? And she's looking at me with just tears going down her cheeks. Her grandfather's name was Jan on the mom's side. He was a fisherman in Denmark. He fit the description. He died of lung cancer, and he never told his own daughter that he loved her while he walked the planet.
So, yeah, so you were getting that definitely coming through.
But here's the thing. I thought it was my imagination. And so for the course of the 3 days that I was at this seminar, was I right all the time? Nope. Maybe 25, 30% of the time I was right. The other time it was just my imagination. But I was so right on some occasions that without a doubt I knew this was real, because people now would turn to me. They saw my Uncle Chuck. They described him. They saw my grandfather. They saw, I mean, there's so many things. There were things that they told me that I actually went back and I asked my grandmother, and they were true. And it's like, okay. You know, so it wasn't like somebody was just reading my mind. There's things I didn't even know about.
Sure, of course, yeah.
So that opens a door. First of all, it rested my mind. Like, oh, I have nothing to fear. To have that load off me, and even for other people, to have that off them. And that's one of the reasons in What We Don't Die, I give all my journey, the whole thing, the doctors, the scientists, the physicists that I learned remote viewing, the EVP stuff, the doctors that are involved with reincarnation studies, near-death experiences, you know, the doctor that has worked with people that have only been blind all their life, have had near-death experiences and can see in that place beyond life and death. You know, there's so much exploration that's out there that normally we don't hear about. And I want to put it all under one roof so that people don't have to have a near-death experience. They don't have to spend thousands of dollars to take a course with a medium to find out if it's real. Like, you can get the trust and the faith by reading a chapter in a book. And it opens up to a whole different kind of living art, to not have a fear of dying. There's a much lower fear associated with living.
Sandra, do you think that the culture, are we opening up more? Are we accepting life after death as a reality in terms of as a collective?
Yes. When we were kids, I don't remember how old you said you were. I think you're about my age, so I'm 47. And when we were kids, very little did we ever hear about any psychic things or mediums, or I remember there was one person I heard about that was a medium, and everybody said she was crazy. Well, now we've got things like all these paranormal shows, The Ghost Whisperer. I don't know if you've ever watched The Long Island Medium, but it has become a regular thing. There was a survey done back in the 70s, and I think there was a very low percentage of people that believed in life after death and that their loved ones were still around and things. And now in the 2000s and whatever, I don't have the accurate number in front of me, but it was something like 70-something% now believe. And so it is a common thing that people will go to an astrologer or get their cards done or go to an angel therapy practitioner, all these alternative things and these different kinds of healing, and people are more open to it.
Definitely. I think so. I agree with you. I think so. Now, the book you've titled, again, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death, is it healthy to be a skeptic?
It is, and it isn't. So I think here's a couple of things I want to say. I think where the skepticism comes from that's not so healthy is that when we're little kids, everything is happy-go-lucky, everything's great, and then things start happening. So I got lost at Disneyland when I was a kid, scared to death. I've had the rest of my life in fear, feeling very independent and that I don't matter and all this. And did it happen when I was 4 years old, lost at Disney? I don't know. But we all certainly know kids and even adults that we might see them as great people, but if you were to ask them, they're not successful, or they're not pretty, or they're too fat, or they're not good enough. So at a very young age, this voice starts growing in our minds that we really convince ourselves of these really nasty, self-defeating things about us. So the skepticism, as far as like life after death, my mind, that mind, bought right into what everybody else was saying. And if it was something my dad said or my mom said, well, then it had to be truth, right? Because our parents know everything, right? So if they didn't believe in this stuff, well, neither was I going to believe in it. So that's one hand of skepticism. Because even now, 9 times out of 10, if I'm on a radio show or something, it's like, I'm greeted by that skeptical mind, like, oh, go ahead, prove to me. Go ahead, prove to me. And so I diffuse it a little bit about talking about this mind because even the DJ or the television show host, whoever it is, you might not be able to see it in them, but they have that voice that either doesn't trust or isn't good enough or whatever. And so to start saying, it's that voice, that's that voice that's asking this question right now because it is good to be skeptical on other things. And I say skepticism as a part of, like, don't believe everything you've been taught. There's this fascination with technology right now, right? So we all have our iPads, iPhones, Macs, computers, TVs, all this, Androids, all these things. We've got all these gadgets. We're living in this technology age. Okay, great. So I've got people that are just like, well, there's no proof of life after death. There just can't be. So I want people to be skeptical. I want people to start wondering. I want people to start digging into things like, do you know how big this universe is? I mean, they say that there's 1,000 stars like our sun for every grain of sand on our planet. That's huge. I want people to look at their hand that's right out in front of them and say, okay, yeah, 5 fingers. Okay, great. Yeah, I see that. Well, we're made up of these molecules, and inside the molecules are atoms, and this is all
Right.
proven science. This isn't Sandra hocus pocus. Inside those atoms is vibrating energy. If you were to put a camera inside one of our atoms, it would be empty. There would be no matter. We are, and everything we see around us is just this energy bouncing around. Well, that's pretty freaking fabulous. Like, how is that possible? So as vast as the universe is just as mind-blowing as how, right into our cells in a quantum level that we can even exist. You and I
Exactly.
are not in front of each other, and we're talking. Oh, my gosh. I mean, it's huge. There's radio waves connecting us. Like, my laptop's here, but it's not connected to anything. And how the heck can I see your website? That's amazing. Years ago, this planet Earth was just rocks and water and grass and trees and dirt. And now suddenly we have iPhones and we have satellites in outer space, and we can communicate. I mean, 150 years ago, if you would have said that there would be these automobiles, and inside them would be a little box, and voices would come out of it, people would be thinking you're doing the devil's work, right?
Exactly.
So now, 2013, going on 2014, all of this, and our little mind, that little voice inside of our head that can be so destructive, it has this really, I don't want to say it's a cool thing because it's not cool, but what it does is it downplays everything in our existence as no big deal. So the first time people have children,
Right.
oh, my God, it's a big deal. How do they feel about it now? No big deal, Or
Yes.
That's their sweetheart. Or even like seeing the first sunrise or something like that. It's no big deal anymore. So I want people to be wondrous again, because when you start digging up stuff, like even somebody challenged me on an interview the other day about electronic voice phenomena. And for your listeners that don't know, EVP is taking a tape recorder and recording the sound of nothing, or the sound of water dropping or rain outside or something like that. And then when you play it back, there's voices on it. Now, as odd as that sounds, it's very real. U.S. government's even been involved with this, and there's people that have been doing this for 20 years. And I dabbled in that, too, on my search of what else is possible. And so on this radio show, the gentleman who was interviewing me is actually into paranormal research and hotspots and ghost hunting and all that.
Oh, yeah, it's very big in the paranormal scene, yes.
Yeah, but now he didn't buy into EVP. So he says, well, I don't think that's real. And I thought, oh, isn't that funny? That you're in all this, but this can't be. So I just challenged him a little, and I said, I've picked up recordings that I've actually known people's names. One man I worked with, I got a recording that it said, hello, Billy, remember the game we used to play, remember Clue? Well, lo and behold, this man's name is Billy, and his sister had died, and they played Clue.
Yes.
So, and I've got bunches of those examples of things I shouldn't know, but I heard. So this guy says, well, isn't it possible that it's just your psychic mind that picked that up, and it wasn't really the recording? And I just had to laugh, because that is so clearly the skeptical mind, because it is just as wacky to be talking about psychically knowing these things as hearing them. So, now do I believe in everything? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a ghost hunter or anything like that, but I do know this is one heck of a miraculous world we're living in, and we are so much more powerful than we know. And I'm out for people to have that fulfilled life, not live in the dead zone and take everything for granted.
So when did you make the connection now that, wait a minute, was it just all these little evidences and these little experiences that you had, you kind of put the pieces together, or was there some kind of a personal revelation that you really, wow, now I get it? I mean, what happened that you really were able to make this connection?
I got it when I did the course in mediumship in California. I tried to lose it. I tried to not think about it anymore, that the answer was great, I got it, I have nothing to be fearful of. But there is this problem, Art, when you have something good. I think there's like our higher self, or the side of us that knows what the right thing is to do.
Sure.
I knew how many people have lost a loved one and how valuable this information would be to others. But because I couldn't trust what was coming out of my own head, because I wasn't accurate all the time, not even close to all the time, I didn't want to tell anybody about it. So I started dabbling, not for myself, although I did think some of these things were cool, but I almost felt like I had this moral responsibility that if I could give more evidence, there'd be a lot less pain on the planet. So many people die themselves when a loved one dies. There was a woman that read We Don't Die, and she actually gave the book to her mom. Her mom had lost her husband. They were married 40-something years, and the mother hadn't left her house in 5 months after her husband died. And so the daughter thought, well, I'll give her this book. Maybe it'll make a difference. It didn't just make a difference. She's out of the house. She's living her life. She's taking country line dancing classes. She's involved with the community. Now, that would not have happened without her reading my story.
Yes.
And so so basically, I never anticipated me writing this, and we can get into the death of my dad that actually was the catalyst that actually had me write this thing. But I had it that someday maybe I would, if I had enough information, I'd put it out there for people. But I got busy in my own life. My own little voice kicked in about, working hard, and so I put it on the back burner.
Well, what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a short break, okay? And basically, when we come back, we're going to actually continue with the memorial tribute to Boston poet Christopher Peters, who suddenly passed away on October 25th, 2013. We'll also talk to his sister Laura. She's coming on the show to really talk about her recent loss, how she's coping with his passing. She'll also share with us some of his most recent poems that he recently wrote. Also, we'll get more advice from Sandra Champlain. So we'll be back. This is Other Side of Life. Welcome back to Other Side of Life. Tonight's topic, We Don't Die. Tonight's guest, best-selling author and inspirational speaker and grief expert, Sandra Champlain. Now, my next guest that's coming up is also going to be part of the tribute to Christopher Peters. She's here, and her name is Laura Peters. She is actually the sister of Chris Peters. Laura, welcome to Other Side of Life.
Thanks so much, Art, for having me on the show.
And I want to introduce you to Sandra Champlain. Sandra, this is Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Sandra, how are you?
I'm good, but I'm so sorry about your brother. And
I know. I'm still in a little bit of shock. It's sort of been a blur of time passing, and it seems like it just happened yesterday.
Yeah, and there's no emotion harder than what you're going through. So
I know.
I wish I had a magic wand, but I'm glad at least we're meeting here.
Yeah. One aspect of your book in We Don't Die is grief. You know, you talk about the grief process, and I want to know if you can just talk about what grief is to the listeners and what actually that happens when we're grieving.
I sure can. Well, can I give you a little bit of the backstory? Because I think it helps as well. Art is everybody's heard now my life after death journey, and oh great, how wonderful what I learned, but I put it on the back burner. My dad got diagnosed with cancer in January of 2010, and his health rapidly deteriorated, and I spent the last 5 months of Dad's life by his side, and he died May 11th, 2010, which was the single most painful experience of my life up till, so far, and I'm 47. And not only going through the loss of losing my dad, but there's something called anticipatory grief, which when we lose a loved one or we know it's coming, all the signs of grief kick in way early. So there's anger, there's depression, there's all kinds of things associated with it even beforehand. So how this represented in my life is not only did I have the fear of losing Dad and sadness and anger associated with it, but I started having really major arguments with my siblings about Dad's care and how we were going to handle things. And of course, Dad's afraid, my siblings are afraid, I'm afraid, and it all just came out into this huge mess that had us fighting. And we never, ever, ever fought before that. Maybe when we were little kids, but that's normal. But as adults, we didn't. And so it was unpredictable what would happen. And then so Dad passes away. Horrible suffering death from cancer, which really opened my eyes to how painful things can be for some human beings. And so not only did I lose Dad, but now those arguments continued with my siblings that haven't been repaired. Somehow I got labeled as the greedy sister. These things that you hear about other families suddenly happened in my family. So I was at the lowest of low places. And basically, I wasn't okay with it. I'm always 99% of the time this happy-go-lucky person. And I was so depressed, and I was so sad, and I kept having these same thoughts over and over and over in my head. And now not having my siblings talking to me, it was the worst part of my life. And so somehow you heard me in the beginning of the show, I'm very, very inquisitive about things. And, I found out there was hypnosis. Well, let me just take a course on it and see what it is. Well, the light bulb went off in my head that says, this is grief. And yes, I've lost loved ones before and pets and things, but never somebody as close. And the good news and the bad news is the more you love someone, the more it hurts. And, because some people don't have a hard time with grief. Well, I don't think they have close relationships, those people. So kudos to all of us that can love fully. But I found
Can you talk about the addictive brain, how we become addicted to people, and that's sort of also part of the grief?
Yeah, okay. This goes back to answer your question, is what grief is. If we can imagine a healthy brain, and now we call this phenomena love, okay? And we feel it, and it's real. And there is such thing as love. But the same time we love somebody, there are chemicals in our brain that actually get and neurotransmitters and all these attachments and bonds form with the thoughts, the memories, the actual beingness of another person, or it can be a pet, or, if you have a job long enough or whatever. So we have these chemicals that are running through us. When we lose someone we love, we are no longer getting that person. We're no longer getting those chemical hits in our brain. So, yes, of course, we love them and we miss them. But on a physical standpoint, what's happening in our brain is going through a withdrawal. And I like to compare it, and I know this is a poor comparison, but if someone was addicted to drug or alcohol or something like that, and all of a sudden you take it away from them, your body goes through a withdrawal process, and it is painful, 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 painful. And I believe grief is more painful than any kind of addiction, any kind of anything, because, of course, we love the people that we've lost.
Right.
So our grieving brain that normally has 100% of these neurotransmitters functioning and chemicals and things firing, it drops down to about 10% of these things that we have in our brain. We actually lose a lot of the neurotransmitter called serotonin, which controls our memory, our perception, our mood. Without serotonin, that's when the anger comes up. Without serotonin, that's where the depression and the sadness come in. And on top of genuinely loving someone that we've lost, the memory gets impaired, and so there's that feeling of shock. There's that feeling of, often guilt can kick in, and then we can replay a same conversation we've had over and over and over and over. And it's like our brain takes over on autopilot, and it's trying to find something to hold on to build itself back up again. It's trying to rewire itself for survival. And unfortunately, oh man, it's awful. It's just awful. And to go through grief, like I said, I believe it's the single most painful thing a human being can go through. And it's like having a cut, a really deep one, and you can't rush the healing. It's something that the brain has to restore itself in its own time. Obviously, like if we had a cut on our hand, there's things that we can do to make it heal a little quicker, and there are things we can do to help build the serotonin. But the only way through grief is actually through grief.
Right.
And it's, I wish I had, like I said, I wish I had a magic wand for this one to really, help ease the pain.
Well, I have a question to ask Laura. I just want to know, Laura, what's this been like for you for the past few weeks? What's this process been like? As you know, Christopher, for those out there that don't know, Christopher J. Peters, he's actually a personal friend of mine, and he's the brother of Laura. He was an amazing poet, and we're going to be hearing some of his poetry a little bit later. We both have lost someone that we really love, and wanted to find out really how what this process has been for her. What's it been like for you, Laura?
Well, I think there's a difference between losing somebody over a period of time. Like, Sandra, you were talking about how, you had some time with your dad.
Yeah.
You were able to, do some processing, and you got to say goodbye, and you got to, plan. And he knew, and yes, there's a lot of fear in that. Well, my brother just disappeared. After he was gone.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to say goodbye. And, I didn't, but the way in which he came to me, he was coming to see me, to read his poetry to me. We were having a meeting, and he never made it to the meeting. And so the next time I saw him, he was in the hospital, and he was gone. So that's incredibly painful. That's been really hard to process. That's the shock, this incredible shock of not having him anymore. And, just at the last conversation we had, and I did get to say goodbye to him because we spoke the night before because we were confirming our time. We were going to get together. And so we did get to say we loved each other, and we did get to say goodbye, I love you, I'll see you tomorrow kind of thing. And so I've been through another, I lost my life partner to leukemia when he was 42 and I was 37. And so that's a whole different thing. I went through that whole process. He had cancer, and so that was something. I got to say goodbye to him. I was there when he died, and so I went through that. And I also have lost my father. So those are three different processes, and I think grief is different through each one of those. It's different each time you lose somebody. It's each person you lose is a different scenario. You know what I mean? It's a different relationship, and it's a different process each time. But it all comes down to a lot of the same feelings. That great loss, the emptiness, and the feeling that you just don't know. There's this mystery about it, and so
has this
all
gotten
the
you to
memories.
think a little bit? I'm sorry to interrupt, Laura. Has this sort of gotten you to think about life after death, or a life beyond?
Well, yes, and as a matter of fact, Sandra, I wanted to say to you that I went right out and I found your book, and I've been reading it, and I'm it's comforted me a lot. It's really stuff that I've been thinking about a lot of my life anyway. And a lot of the stuff that you're talking about in your book is, I can relate to it very deeply. My brother was somebody who believed that that we go on. He believed it with all of his heart. And I was the skeptic, you see, and so that's what drew me in, the title about being a skeptic. Because he was always saying, oh no, you have to have faith because we're really going to meet again, and so I'm finding comfort in that now that he's gone, because maybe we will meet again, and I'm still skeptical, but I'm trying to remember his words. And you know how they say that you start to lose, maybe this has to do with the neurotransmitters and all the processes of grief, but I've heard people say again and again, well, I'm forgetting what they sound like. I can't remember what their laugh was like. In all the cases of the people that I've lost that are really close to me, that's not true for me.
Yeah.
So I can hear my brother's laugh. I can hear his words. I can feel his personality in the quiet time when I'm just alone and, I talk to him. I feel like he's there, so it's
Sandra,
really...
are these normal feelings that people have when they're going through this process?
Oh, absolutely. And you hit it right on the head that it's different for everybody. There's no cookie-cutter way that we experience it. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with the stages of grieving, and yes, we can hit one or all of them, but there's no pattern. There's minds that can't remember. When my grandmother died, I did not get to say goodbye to her, and it happened very suddenly, and I went through that. Like, I couldn't even hear her voice. I couldn't even picture her face. And I was worried that would stay that way. And I think it had to do with more the faulty brain during this time than anything. And so it took some time for me. But then it's like, oh, I can, like right now I can feel what her hand felt like and her long fingernails and her hair and what she smelled like and all that. Love that size, but it's to be compassionate in where you are and people that have had a loss. I mean, it's severe. And I just, my heart goes out to you for the losses you've dealt with. And I'm,
thank you.
There's no words there's no words, but, just...
Yeah, I mean, as I was thinking, as you were talking, Sandra, about the brain, you're thinking about, when you're losing multiple people, how that's just one impact on the brain, and then another impact on the brain, and another impact on the brain. So yeah, I mean, on that biochemical level, it's just, very, very intense. I never really thought of it from that angle before.
Yeah, well, even you had mentioned being in shock. My dad's funeral, I didn't cry. Like, what happened here? I mean, it's just like I couldn't even get in touch with any of the feelings of sadness. I was just like a deer in the headlight. Just nothing.
Kind of on autopilot.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted you to start off by Laura, if you could be open to reading one of Chris's poems that you brought for the show. That's something you'd be open to hearing.
Absolutely. I would be delighted to read one of the poems, the one that just struck me the most, because he had it on him when he died. It was in his bag along with some other of his belongings. But he was coming to read the poems to me and to share them with me. And, it was so poignant. Anyway, it's not titled. It begins, I saw the bluebird of happiness the other day. And he asked me, are you happy? And I replied, sometimes. And he said, how would you like to be happy all the time? Just follow me, and you will be. Happy and free, that's how you'll be. Yet there's a gnawing question that leaves an icy residue. This question leaves me guessing, how can I follow a bird when I have no wings?
So that was the last poem he had on him when he passed.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm having my sister try to call me. Okay. That was there were 3 poems on him that he had just written, and that was one of the 3.
Wow.
Okay. And what was the next one that he had on him? You said he had 2 of them or 3 of them?
Yeah, 2. Well, he had this. The second one is called Tomorrow, and this is particularly kind of blew my mind because there wasn't a tomorrow for him. It says, tomorrow never comes, for there is always someone or something keeping it from me. Today is just today, and it always fades away. Nothing ever changes. I always find myself winding up in a hospital. No matter what I say or do or write, I'm always on the treadmill of a hospital. So hard to remain stable. I give so much away. Perhaps things would change for me if I had a job. But how can I get a job when I'm living in the hospital? Some people say it has to be God's will or Buddha's will. But what about my will? Do I ever get to do anything that I want to do? Maybe when his kingdom comes. Maybe tomorrow.
Wow.
It's beautiful. What do you, how do you know him, Laura, so well and his personality, and when you hear that poem, what insights do you get about Chris?
For me, it's about the simplicity of the words, and how beautiful, he was very complicated, but when he was writing poetry, it was such simple words, and they were the things that meant the most to him at that present moment. His poetry is present, whatever's going on right then and there for him. He captures it, but he does it without, anything. There's no cluttering. He was very generous of spirit, and I just think that his poetry reflects that.
Mm-hmm. Now, Sandra, do you find that when as part of the grieving process, creativity is a very good way of coping with the grief process?
I do, and I feel a little funny sharing this stuff because I don't pretend to have all the answers, and I don't want to come across to anybody as the grief expert and I know what to do.
Sure.
The thing is I'm a human being, much like the two of you guys, that have had loss, have learned. I mean, we're all on our journeys through life, and it comes a point where when you find something that works and it helps, like we want to give it back and we want to contribute it to others, and just if we can help out a little way. So I can say from everything that I've learned and all the research I've done, and there's some common things across the board that help. But that doesn't mean to say that one's better than the other or that this is going to work definitely or whatever. But if we can quiet the mind a bit, and like you said, Art, creativity is a wonderful thing. If we can, and this might be a silly example, but one of the times I was at my all-time lowest was right before Dad passed away, and my siblings wouldn't let me see him because they wanted to be alone with him. So that was right at the beginning of being the outcast sister, and I was at such a loss, like, what am I going to do? And, now I have my whole foundation pulled out from me. And so a girlfriend of mine came to scoop me up, and she says, we're going to lunch, and I'm taking you to a puppy place. And it was one of these, like, the word isn't organic. I don't know what I'm looking for, but it was not one of the puppy farms that you hear about in the malls. It was just a mom-and-pop operation that people go to buy their puppies, and it was so clean and nice, and you could play with the dogs. Well, I had these puppies all over me, licking my face and everything. It did what it needed to do. It stopped the pattern going on in my brain of gloom and doom and despair. And it just got me into another place for a little while, and it felt so good. It felt so good. And then, I still had to deal with everything else, but just for a little while, it's like going on a vacation from real life, just for a little while to stop the thought.
Connecting with something, that makes you feel good is really important, I think.
It is. And then on
something that's...
I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's fine. I'm happy to listen.
I think, what's also interesting about this topic, too, about grief, is we really don't delve into it like you have. I mean, you've really taken the initiative to really dive into the topic. And it doesn't seem like people really take it seriously for some reason. They, okay, she's grieving and that's okay, or okay, well, she'll get over it, he'll get over it. It's not like that for everybody, is it?
Oh, no way. In fact,
no.
I was talking to Art before the show started about years ago, even in European countries, somebody would wear like an armband for 6 months to show that they're grieving, and people would respect them and honor them and kind of leave them alone, whereas now you're lucky if you get a few days off from work and people expect you to be some other way. I think death is something that's so avoided. Now, I don't want to be the death lady or the grief lady, and, I'm not on my high horse about it. I'm not. But I think for the most part, we don't see people aging too much. We're not around the nursing homes and the hospitals, and then sudden grief strikes, and it's just like, oh, my gosh, where did this come from? And then people think you should be over it. People don't know how to deal with somebody who's grieving, and then all of a sudden you're in the shoes, and it hurts like hell. And so to be able, like back to the puppy or the creativity and the poetry, to be able to put the mind on vacation even for a few minutes, not only does it ease the pain a little, but it actually starts that serotonin production back up and can actually get you feeling a little bit better.
Yeah. I think often we turn to, I think I found that people... I want to be medicated, and I haven't wanted that. I want to feel what I feel. I want to feel my feelings. I want to be able to talk about Chris and, celebrate him and be able to cry and let things go as well. But, I think it is a subject that people do avoid. because it is so painful and because it's a reflection of something we all have to go through. And it's scary to people, you know, it's about their mortality, something that we all have to face. But you mentioned Kubler-Ross earlier, and I think she was such an amazing person in opening up those doors.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant.
Definitely.
Some ideas around, but I'm so grateful that you're doing this work. I think it's spearheading something. I think it just is going to open up the doors to a conversation that we need to have evolution with. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people need to be more comforted than they get on this subject. Because there's often people go through grief alone, and I don't think we have to. I think we can do it with each other as well.
Oh, exactly. Can I confide something in you guys? Well, everybody else is listening to it, can hear it. Well, I was never, somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought the life after death research that I did was good and I should be published, but, you know, I'm no author. Other people do that kind of thing, and, you know, my words aren't important, and all that running through my head. But when Dad died, exactly, when Dad died and I learned what I learned about grief, just being a good Samaritan, I spoke into my computer and I recorded a 70-minute audio, and I titled it How to Survive Grief. I bought the domain name survivegrief.com, and I said, you know, darn it, I'm putting this on the Internet. It's going to help somebody, I'm sure, because it's information that I learned helped me. And so I only made a few Facebook posts, not much, and in a matter of just a few months, I had over 3,000 downloads that came from 15 countries. And better than that, the email started. How it relieved people's pain, how it gave people hope, how people could now be compassionate with their loved ones and understand the urge to fight. And then the final thing that happened that I said, Sandra, you've got to be courageous and get this out there, is people started reporting that they were so depressed they were going to commit suicide. And because of listening to my words, they realized they were experiencing grief. They took some of the steps to help ease the pain. They understood it, and they got back on with their lives. And so, guys, get enough of those emails coming in. It was like, okay, I need to do something with this. Now, to be honest with you, the title of my book, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death, I definitely wanted to fulfill on that promise to people. And I also am very strategic, and I know that Life After Death is the #1 most searched book right now, and it has been for a long time. There's always 1 or 2 books at the top of the New York Times bestseller list with a title like Proof of Heaven or Heaven is for Real or My Journey into Heaven. And I thought, and here's the confession, that I'm going to get people on the hook with the title, deliver the goods, because I've got some good stuff to share. But I'm going to include a chapter on grief, because whether people want to learn it or not, they're going to. There are millions of siblings that come apart when a parent dies. There's over 80% of couples that get divorced if they lose a child. You think just a year ago to Newtown, Connecticut, the devastation. And can you imagine losing your child and then losing your spouse? And now there's so much. There's over 1 million people a year worldwide with grief-related suicides. And so I'm like, this has got to stop. And of course, honest to God, yes, I want to have my relationship back with my siblings. And I thought if I could bring light to this subject and have people understand that it's not your fault, it's not their fault, this is what's happening. Getting into a fight with someone grieving is much like you know, how much weight would you hold in a conversation with someone coming off of a drug or alcohol addiction? You'd think, oh, well, they're losing their mind because they're there. I want people to have compassion. And then ultimately, I want relationships to be restored. I want people to embrace that our time on here on planet Earth is short. I do, with all of my heart, believe your brother, your partner, my dad, your mom are that they're all with us right now, just cheering us on that we're having this conversation, and that while we're here, we make the most of being here. And is it hard? Absolutely. Are there good times? Yes. Are there rotten times? Yes. In fact, my favorite line in the book was, life can be really great, but it can really suck sometimes, too.
Well, Sandra, I wanted to also mention something else that you said, and which I like. You talk about the things that you should never tell a grieving person. And could you just throw out a few of those for those listening? Because sometimes people will say things to a grieving person and not even realize that they're actually saying the wrong thing. And can you just give some examples of that?
Sure. I can't remember all of them, but number one is don't avoid your friend that's grieving. So often we don't know what to say, so we don't say anything at all and we disappear. So don't do that. It's very easy to just say, I've never experienced this before. I don't know what you're going through, but you know what? I love you and I'm here for you. You just tell me what you need. That's a winner. But to say things like God needed another angel in heaven, or it was his time, or if somebody like my dad or my grandmother, they were older, right? Well, I'm sorry. It doesn't matter how old they are. It hurts just as much. So to say their time.
Or they lived a long life.
Oh, they lived a long life. Oh, I wanted to kill people that said that. And in fact, I don't know if you've been through this yet or not, but I went through a phase where, man, I didn't want anybody around me. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody in my life. And then if all of a sudden somebody was around and they were willing to listen, oh, my God, I told them the story of my brother, my sister, what they did about Dad, and then I repeated it all over again. And then if there was another person that came along, it all came back out all over again. And it's just
that's the thing about grieving, too, Sandra, I think, is that people tell their story over and over and over.
Yeah.
And I think we need to because it's our story. And I think a lot of times, people that are close to you, they're like, oh, you're telling that story again. But I think the compassion of it is to be able to sit with somebody and hear that story as many times as they need to tell it.
Exactly.
Because that's part of the grieving process, too, is to be able to talk about it over and over if you need to.
And one thing, too, and I could have never anticipated this, and I know it's different from all people, but I'm not, I wasn't contemplating suicide, so I'm not going to say that, but I was in such a dark place that I could understand why people would want to go. I thought, this sucks. This is awful. And so I never in a million years thought, I thought this is going to take a long time. I don't think I'll ever be normal again. It was awful. But out of my worst time that I've ever felt, in the most pain I've ever experienced, came all of a sudden now the best thing I've ever done, impacting now between my grief audio and the over 3,000 books that I've sold just this past year, because it's a new release. Over 10,000 people now have heard the message about grief and grieving, which is, I want to deliver everything, life after death, grief, and living a powerful life. But really, I want people to have compassion with grief. And I thought, that's all happened because I went through the hardest time of my life. So it's very, when you're in the midst of it, it hurts like hell. And can it take a long time? Absolutely. But I think for most of us, even when we look back on things that have happened in our life, even the worst things, like some of our biggest life lessons came out of the times that we hurt the most. And it's different for other people, but instead of being stopped in our grief, And some of it, yeah, we do have to have faith that something better's coming or there's a reason to it. And I believe, and this empowers me because we can go down one of two tunnels, and one of them is we're a victim. We lock ourselves in the house, or, we go whatever that is for us. Or we can be in the driver's seat of our life and say, I don't know why this has happened. It sure hurts like hell, but out of this, what can I do with it? What am I learning? How can I grow? I mean, that doesn't all come right away because you're in the depths of the pain. But there really is, there can be, and it's happened for many, many people, that out of their grief came something really profound. And so to just
not to be broken, but to be broken open. To
I like
find that place. That you are broken in a way, but to then transform it into something that, comforts other people and comforts you and makes you, the whole thing about creativity, look what you created out of your grief, something really positive.
And I didn't think I could write.
Right.
I just sat down and imagined a friend, and I told a friend the story. Yes, exactly.
It's...
Well, I wanted to...
it is... Yeah, go ahead, Art. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to really thank both of you for coming on tonight, and I just wanted to know, because we're going to be coming soon to the close of the show, I was wondering if Laura could read one more poem before, of Chris's before we close out.
I would be happy to do that. I would be so happy. And this is a poem that he had published in a book, and it's a poem that he wrote back in 2000. And it's, I remember him coming to me and showing it to me. He really wanted to share it with me. And it's called Evidence of Thread. It goes, the mist outside my window calls me, outside to other worlds besides mine, where resides a fine line of the evidence of thread. Lying on my back in my room won't get me there. I must leave my bed while I still can. Out there only lies evidence of thread. I go out to the garden to seek to unharden this cold heart of mine. It is there I see the sparrow who spares me a moment or two of his peace and silence. The humans around me don't fathom this unspoken sharing. They just keep rushing where doesn't seem to matter to them. Through this stillness, though, I can see the evidence of thread. Leaves falling now, the crown of autumn arrives. Gold, red, brown, and yellow are his colors today. Who can say tomorrow? If only to win this grandeur, even for a brief space in time, ah, what a treasure that would be. True solace for the soul. Time does allow for this, too. If I had the money, the house, the car, the cozy job, and still found myself lacking, I would gladly trade all of these for the passing chance, simply to observe the evidence of thread.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, he was such a neat person, really. But thank you so much, Laura, for reading that and for bringing his poems to the show tonight.
It brought me great pleasure.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Sandra, could you just tell everyone listening how they can reach you if they want to find out more about the book, We Don't Die?
Sure. And wait, I just have to interject something about thread.
Yeah.
What I heard in your brother's writing is when he just got into the present moment and he could just be the witness and observe, that is the magic of life. And that's something we should all remember and take forward. When we can quiet the busyness and the busy thinking and all that, and whether it's looking at the sparrow outside or just being completely where you are listening to a song or whatever that is, and pay attention, that's those moments that, whether it gives us peace, raises the serotonin level, eases the pain, that's where people can access, their imagination, and the deceased loved ones come through. It's what the psychics say. It's all the quiet mind. There really is magic in that place. So thank you for sharing that. And back to me, We Don't Die, A Discovery of Life After Death is available at your favorite bookstore or at Amazon. And you can also get it at my website, wedon'tdie.com. And that's also the way to connect with me and email me and listen to that Survive Grief audio. And I've got all kinds of information there on the website as well about life after death and grief.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for coming on the show, Other Side of Life. And I will definitely be in touch with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you, Art.
Good night.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, too. Big hugs. Yeah.
Big hug to you, too. And you, Art, too.
Thank you. And Laura, thank you so much for coming on. She's wonderful, isn't she wonderful? Thank you so much, Laura, and for coming on and sharing. And we send our prayers and our love to Chris and to all those out there listening tonight. Thank you so much for coming on and tuning in on the show. You can find out more about Other Side of Life Radio by going to our Facebook page. That's othersideofliferadio.org/Other Side of Life. Thank you so much and have a good night.